Hey guys, welcome back. We continue with the book Cracking Codes with Python. We already learned that the transposition cipher is more secure than, for example, the Caesar cipher, because the transposition cipher can possibly have thousands of different keys. But we're still able to use a brute force attack if we're able to write a program that can understand English words and therefore figure out which key will lead to words that are actually correct English words. So we're going to write this program in this video. Let's get right into it. We're going to write a program that recognizes when a decrypted message is displayed in English. That way, if the computer decrypts our message using the wrong key, it knows to try out a different key, and we're going to be able to use a brute force approach to decrypt a message. If you want to follow along, you can head over to inventwithpython.com. The link is also in the description down below. Now, the first question is, of course, how we can basically teach our computer to understand English. And the easiest way to do that is to basically use a dictionary file that includes a large number of English words. And then we can have a look at the individual words in a text and check if those words match the words in the dictionary that we have. And if that's the case, then we know that we indeed have an English word. If we take a look at such a sentence, for example, robots are your friends, we can go ahead and basically split the string here on white space characters. That is going to give us back the individual words, and we can then check if those words match the strings included in our dictionary. And we don't have to write the dictionary with the individual words from scratch. Instead, we can head over to the website here, also linked in the description down below. And if we scroll down all the way to the bottom, we can download the source context for the book, and then we can have a look at the downloaded folder. Now, inside of that downloaded folder, we can find a number of different files, one of which is called dictionary.txt. And if we open it up, we can see a number of different words starting from the letter A. And if we scroll down, we can see it's a very long list starting from A and then going through all the different letters of the alphabet. And these are basically all individual English words that are always displayed in their own line. So we can compare words to that dictionary to check whether those words are actually part of that dictionary. And if they are, we know we have a proper English word. So now that we downloaded the dictionary file, we can go ahead and we can write a program in order to check the different sentences that we have, and we can verify whether this includes proper English words or not. So for that, we're going to go ahead and create a new file, and we can save it right away under detectenglish.py. Now, in order for our program to actually work, we need to make sure that our dictionary file is in the same directory as our detect English module that we are writing. And then inside of our script, we first of all define the uppercase letters. So here we have all the letters from A to Z in uppercase. We store that in a variable, specifically in a constant, so we can very easily reference that later on. We also create a second constant here, which includes all uppercase letters that we defined up here, as well as all lowercase letters. For that, we are using the lower method that we learned about before. And we're also going to include a white space character, the tab character, and the new line character. And this saves us quite a bit of typing later on because we can simply reference those constants whenever we want to reference, for example, uppercase letters or letters and spaces. Next up, we define a new function called load dictionary. And here we are first of all going to open our dictionary.txt file, which of course needs to be stored in the same directory as our code. And that opened file will then be referenced by dictionary file. Next up, we're defining a dictionary, which is a concept we haven't covered yet. We're going to take a closer look at that in a moment, but a dictionary basically allows us to store key value pairs, so we can reference a specific key and thereby reference a certain value. We're then going to reference our dictionary file that we opened. We're calling read on it in order to read it out, and we're going to split each of those entries based on a new line. And this works because if you have another look at our dictionary.txt file, we can see each word is displayed in its own line. So at the end of this, there's basically always a new line character, and therefore we are going to split each of those words on the new line that gives us back each of those individual words. And then we're going to loop over each word inside of that dictionary file. And we're going to use the empty dictionary that we created here. And we are going to set that word as a key, and we set the value to none. So basically we are just taking all the words inside of our dictionary file, storing it in a separate dictionary, and we are then able to assign a value to each of those words. After that, we need to make sure that we close our file, and our load dictionary function here is going to return our English words dictionary. Now after defining that load dictionary function, we are going to call it, And the return value, so our dictionary English words here, is going to be assigned to the English words constant. Now after this first step of setting up our dictionary and basically retrieving all the values and storing them in the English words constant, we're defining a new function, getEnglishCount, which takes a message as an argument. And that argument is going to be turned to uppercase by calling upper on it and stored again in a message variable. And then we're calling remove non-letters, a separate function that we define down here, and store that again in message. After that, we're using the split function, which basically splits our message based on whitespace characters. So rather than having a long sentence, for example, we would have those individual words, and we assign them to possible words. And then we are checking if possible words is empty. If that's the case, so that means if we don't have a single entry inside of our message here basically, then we would return a value of 0. Because this means that we don't have any English words there, so we return a count of 0. But if possible words is not an empty dictionary, then we define a new variable matches that is set to 0, and we loop over all the possible words that we defined up here. And if any of those words that we have in there is included in English words, which is basically our dictionary that we defined up here, English words, if any of those words inside of our message matches one of those words inside of our dictionary, then we are going to increase the value of matches. So rather than having a value of 0, for example, it's going to be increased to a value of 1. And we're going to return the number of matches divided by the number of possible words. So this gives us basically back a percentage of words that are valid English words. Now, as part of our getEnglishCount function, we were using the remove non-letter function, which is defined just below. And this basically makes sure that we only work with letters and not with any other symbols. So here we're defining a new list, which we're calling letters only. And we have a look through each of those symbols inside of the message that we're working with. If any of those symbols is included in our letters and space constant that we defined at the beginning, then we're going to append that symbol to our letters only dictionary. And at the end, we are going to join all the valid letters together, and we're going to return that. And by doing that, we basically make sure that we remove all non-letter characters from the message, and we just return this modified string back. And from there, we can then go ahead and call the split method on our message. And then at the very bottom of our file, we're going to create our main function isEnglish that takes a message, a word percentage, which by default is set to 20, and then a letter percentage, which by default is set to a value of 85. And those default values here basically state that by default 20% of the words must exist in a dictionary file, so must be valid English words, and 85% of all the characters in the message must be letters or spaces. And inside of this function here, we are then calling getEnglishCount, the function which we defined before, which, if you think back, gives us back a percentage of how many actual words were included in our dictionary list. So this basically gives us back a percentage of valid English words, and we are multiplying that by 100 to get an actual percentage. And here we're then checking whether this is greater than or equal to word percentage. And by having this Boolean comparison, so whether the percentage of English words is greater than or equal to the word percentage, so here by default a value of 20, we either get a value of true or false. So words match will either be true if by default that percentage is larger than or equal to 20, or false if the value is lower. And of course, when we call isEnglish, we could also provide a higher value for word percentage if we want to be more strict. After that, we are determining the number of letters that we have inside of our message. For that, we are calling remove non-letters, passing the message to it to remove all characters that are not letters. And then we're calling len on it to get the number of words. After that, we determine the message letter percentage by taking the number of letters that we just determined and dividing it by the length of the message times 100. And finally, we still need to make sure that our letters match. So therefore, we are taking the message letter percentage that we just determined, and we are checking whether that's greater than or equal to the letter percentage. And by default, of course, we set that to 85. So therefore, that means that 85% of all the characters in the message must be letters or spaces. Now, after determining whether words match and letters match, evaluates to true or false, we are then going to use this return statement. And here we're using the AND logical operator. So we are basically checking whether words match evaluates to true and letters match evaluates to true. And only if both of those evaluate to true, then we're going to return a value of true. So therefore, isEnglish is either going to return a value of true, or it's going to return a value of false, and based on that we can determine if the message passed to that function is actually valid English or not. And if we have another look at the very top of our file, in order to use our program, we're going to import that module first of all, and then we're calling the isEnglish function, which of course is defined inside of this file, and we pass some string to it. Now with our file saved and with the dictionary file added to the same directory where we have this code file in, we can head back over to our interactive shell and we can go ahead and import the module. So here we are going to import detect English, and after importing the module we are going to call the isEnglish function that we just looked at, which of course is part of this module, and we're passing a message to it to check whether this is valid English. So in our case here we are going to pass the sentence is this sentence English text to it, pressing enter, and in this case we're gonna get back true, so we know this is proper English text. And when we call this function isEnglish, we just pass the message to it because those two other arguments, word percentage and letter percentage, both have a default value of 20 and 85 respectively, so we can actually run that without passing a second and third argument to our function, and if we decide not to pass that second and third argument, the default values will be used. Now in order for this program to work, we learned about the new dictionary data type, which we have been using here, so let's dive a little bit deeper into that. And as mentioned before, a dictionary is basically a list of key value pairs. So if we have a closer look at this dictionary, for example, we can see we have a key here, which is the string key1, then we have a colon, and then we have a value after that. So in this case, another string called this is a value. And then we separate those different key value pairs by a comma. And after that, we have a second key here called key2, it's a string. And in this case, we have an integer as a value, which again follows after the colon. And in order for Python to know that this is actually a dictionary, we have to wrap the entire expression here in curly braces. So let's press enter. And if we now want to reference any value by referencing the key, we simply type in the name of our dictionary, and then in brackets we are going to pass the key to it, the respective, and if we press enter we're gonna get back the associated value. So here for key1 we get back the associated value, this is a value, but if we want to have a look at the second key value pair, we pass simply key2 as an argument, and then we get back the associated value, so in this case the integer value 42. And we can also add additional key value pairs to our dictionary. So for example, we could say we have, for example, key 3 here, and we assign a value of, let's say, 15 to it. So to add a new key value pair, we would first take the name of the dictionary, so in our case spam, then brackets, and inside of the brackets we're going to write the name of the key that we want to use, then an equal sign, and then the value we want to associate. So in this case here we added a third key value pair, which we can have a look at. If we type in the name of the dictionary, we can see we now have a third key value pair, in this case a string as a key, and then 15 as the associated value. And in some ways, dictionaries and lists might seem similar, but there are some differences. So for instance, dictionary items are typically not in any order. So we would always use a specified key to basically retrieve the associated value. But here, for example, key 3 doesn't necessarily have to be the third item inside of our dictionary. We would simply reference the key to get that particular value back. We also cannot concatenate dictionaries with a plus operator as we can with lists. And of course, dictionaries can use basically any key. So we could use a string as we did here for a key, or we could also use an integer value, for example. On the other hand, lists always use a specified index that's assigned automatically. So starting from 0 all the way up to the length of the list -1, these are always the indices we are going to use to reference the specified elements inside of the list. Now we also saw in our code that we were using the length function before associated with our dictionary. So if you go ahead and we pass our spam dictionary as an argument to the len function, we can see we get back a value of 3 because we have a total of 3 separate key value pairs inside of our dictionary. And that can be useful inside of our program when we want to reference how many words we actually have, because the different words are always the keys inside of our dictionary. And of course there's a value associated, but this gives us back the total number of words we're working with. We also use the in keyword inside of our program to check whether a word is inside of a dictionary. And this operation basically always works on the keys. So we could, for example, check whether the value key1 is in our spam dictionary. and we get back a value of true because we are checking if key 1, the string, is one of the keys inside of the dictionary. But if we check for a value, for example, here's this value, this is a value, if that's inside of spam, we get back false because we only check for the keys, not for the values inside of our dictionary. Now that we understand dictionaries a bit better, we can have a look at some of the other parts of our code. So for example, when we have a message here, we call split on it, and we store that back in possible words. So if we have a message, for example, my very energetic mother, and we call split on it, by default, we're going to split on whitespace characters. So as we run that, we can see we get back a list. And since we split on each whitespace character, we can basically see we get all the individual words back as strings inside of our list. And then of course we can check whether those words are actually inside of our dictionary. And we can see if those are proper English words. Next up, let's have a look at our practice questions. The first question is, what does the following code print? So we have a dictionary here that we define called spam. It has one key value pair. The key is the string name. And we are then going to reference spam with a key of name. So that means we get the value and we're going to print this out. So by running this code, we should get back A1, which should be printed out to us. To verify that, let's open our interactive shell in idle. We are first going to define our spam dictionary. And then we are going to print out the value of our dictionary when we pass the key of name to it. And indeed, we get the key back. So A1, or in this case, we used L as a value. The next question asks us what this specific code prints out. So again, we have a dictionary here with one key value pair. The key is X and the value is bacon. And we print out whether bacon, the string, is inside of our dictionary. And we know from before that we only check for the keys, not for the values. So therefore, X would be inside of the dictionary, but not bacon, so we should get back a value of false. And let's check that in our interactive shell. So we define our spam dictionary, and then we print whether bacon is in spam. Indeed, we get back the value of false. Now the third question is, what for loop code would print the values in the following spam dictionary? So here we have another dictionary, in this case with 3 separate key value pairs, and we can use a for loop to get back the different values. So to do that, we can first of all switch over to our interactive shell and define that spam dictionary. And then we can say for the key in our spam dictionary, we're going to go ahead and we print out the values by passing the key of our spam dictionary. And that should print out Sophie, cat, and 8. So let's run the program. And we can indeed see we are looping through the different key value pairs of our dictionary and always printing out the associated value. Next up, we have the question, what does the following line print? So here we have a print statement. We have the string hello world and we're calling split on it. And we know that by default, split is going to split the string on whitespace. So we would get back a list with the first entry being hello, comma, and the second entry being world exclamation mark. And that should be printed out. Let's double check that in our interactive shell. And we can indeed see that we get back a list with 2 entries with hello as the first element and then world exclamation mark as the second element. Next up, we have a function that we define. So here we have a function called spam that takes an argument. And we have an argument that has a default value. We can declare that by adding the name of the parameter, then an equal signs, and then the default value, in this case 42. And we're printing out the value of X. And then we are calling spam 2 times. This first time we don't provide an argument. That means we're going to use the default argument 42. And we are printing out the value of X. So in this case, that should print 42. And then we call that function again, this time with an argument, hello. So therefore we are not using the default argument of 42. Instead we are using the string hello. And we should be printing out hello. So let's switch over to the interactive shell. We define our function here. And then we can go ahead and call spam with no argument. And indeed, we get back a value of 42. And then we can call spam again, this time with an argument of hello. And then we can see we print the value of hello. And then our final question is, what percentage of words in this sentence are valid English words? So if we count the individual words here, defined by splitting whitespace characters here, then we can find that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 words. And now we can count how many of those are actually valid English words. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And if we then go ahead and we divide 12 by 15, we get 0.8. So that means 80% of those sentences are valid English words. We wrote a program that's able to decrypt English words. We can use this program in order to run a brute force attack. We're going to do that in the next video. If you want to stay up to date, feel free to subscribe to the channel, and see you guys in the next video.